All right, everybody, welcome to RP1. We've got the extras series for the Aurora Space Program. So far, I think I'm going to begin this episode with my X2 plane, a plane that flew in the very beginning of the episode. I'm almost certain that I went over it in the last extras, but just to make sure. So the X2 uses the XASR version of the Aerobee engine, and it uses the XLR 35 RM1 version of the XLR 11 engine. That is this bottom configuration that was used for a missile, and it only has one ignition. So every mission, I would have to replace the engine on the plane. This is the first version, I believe, that actually added those air brakes. Very critical for the function. Something that I like to point out is that when you make an air brake out of a procedural control surface, um, make sure your mass strength multiplier is extremely high. So I would even venture to say put it up to 4, but for the purposes of this plane, I believe I didn't need it to be uh, too high because it's never going to be going that fast. But the strength level determines basically how far you can deflect it without it breaking off. And that's very important if you're going at high speeds and you really need to slow down. So there's that. Um, Not much else to say about the X2, I think. Very simple. If you want to check out all these decals that I put on it, I like to put these danger high explosives on my tank because it makes the plane seem a little bit more experimental, like a rocket. And I never like to decorate any of these drop tanks that I use or drop rockets that I use because my thinking is like if you were in the Aurora Space Program and you were an engineer, right? Would you waste time painting this tank that's going to be destroyed? I mean, I guess the same thought applies for rockets, but this tank is going to be destroyed so quickly into flight, it hardly matters. So I wouldn't paint it. Just saying. This plane obviously is getting reused though, so I paint it. I make it look very nice. And another continued feature of the X planes that I have is a very large vertical stabilizer. Excuse me, I'm a little sick right now. And this vertical stabilizer basically allows me to control at high speeds and with less atmosphere. Uh, Basically, you want to have a tall vertical stabilizer if you're going up to the thinner parts of the atmosphere, just so that way you have more control surface. But yep, the X15, I believe, had a short one, but the entire stabilizer was a control surface. It would rotate like these back all moving wings. But yeah, all right, we're gonna go to the next plane in this series. All right, so here we are with the Posla XJ O2. This plane was absolutely annoying to create. It's whenever you have to do the 22-kilometer altitude contract for the programs, it is the most insane contract. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't know why it's required. It doesn't, I guess it's fine. It's got novelty value, but basically it's just like who can build the best U2 plane. And this is what I came up with. This is about as good as it gets. Um, the trick with this contract, I will say, is you have to have as much thrust as possible and as much air intake as possible. So this intake, so let's look at it. Let's go down to the pitot intake. Let's move my delta V stats over here. This has an intake area of 3.3 meters squared. There you go. Then if I go to jet engines, what am I using? J48. Where is it? Ah, here we go. where is the required intake? 0.246. So I have an extra zero point zero 0.05 intake area for this engine, more than it needs. You want to have that because when you get up to those higher altitudes, it gets really, really difficult to get enough air in the plane to keep the engine running. And so the engine will start to lose thrust and it'll slowly start to dip down, and your plane will have a little bit of trouble maintaining its speed. I find that it's never difficult to actually stay beneath the 300 or so meter per second contract limit on the 22-kilometer contract, because you can barely stay going 200 meters per second at that altitude. So um, you should never have any problems with that. But I will say, like, make sure that you have a good intake area for your engine. This engine also uses an afterburner, um, and so it does kind of guzzle fuel, I will say. So keep that in mind as well. When you have your fuel, I utilized all this as fuel tank, and I haven't filled up the fuselage with fuel. Where is it? Did I use anything? I guess I just filled up these side tanks. Um, so one thing that I thought about is I wanted to put these side tanks as the main fuel source, because I wanted my center of mass to be roughly where the center of lift is, or as close to it as possible. And if I open up the RCS control here, whatever it's called, I forget, RCS build aid, it'll show you my empty center of mass, and it's right on top of the regular center of mass. So that gave us quite a bit of extra. Um, that just allowed me to fly a bit more safely, knowing the plane will not be tilting its center of mass any which way. Um, One thing that I do notice now that I would recommend against is having your center of lift this far behind the center of mass on a glider like this. This is really just a high altitude glider. Excuse me. Um, so I would recommend highly uh, putting your center of lift as close to that center of mass as possible while still being behind it. That will give you, it will give your plane a little bit better lift intrinsically. So you can see this green arrow here. That's going to be the flow of air. And this green arrow is the direction of my wings, the direction that the wings are trying to take me. That's something else I want to recommend is angling your wings upward. So you can just keep the plane level instead of, you don't have to put any angle of attack on the plane. Just keep it completely level and the plane will try to climb. Um, it's something that I have tested multiple times, and I find that for this 22-kilometer altitude contract, if you put any angle of attack up at 22 kilometers, your plane's just going to start losing speed like crazy. It's not going to be able to perform, and you're really going to start falling back down. And it's going to be really difficult for you to stay above that 22-kilometer altitude limit for the required 5 minutes. And same thing with this jet engine, this plane engine that I have down here. It's angled downwards, it's pushing the plane up. Always, always, always want to push the plane upwards. It's basically trying its hardest to stay aloft. Um, these wings have absolutely no mass to strength. So if you remember from the X2 that we just discussed, um, these wings have zero mass to strength ratio. They are so fragile. So now this plane probably can't even handle like a 1G or 1.5G turn. So you want to really be very careful with these wings. That's why I put this little nice no step decal on it. Um, just so people know, don't step on my wings. They're going to pop right off. And let me think. Another thing that you can do with this plane, because it's so wide is you can balance it. So I put these little wheels here, the medium landing gear. They're the only ones that were strong enough to really carry the plane. Uh, and they have two wheels, so they're better at balancing left to right. So I put those little medium landing gear in the plane, and I put these small landing gears on the tips of the wings, and the plane tends to lean to one side or the other when it's on the runway. Um, One thing I've noticed when I've been building these YouTube planes over the multiple times that I've done this contract is these side gears, they absolutely will just obliterate your plane if you are not careful. If you have your spring ratio too high or your dampening ratio too high, as soon as they touch the ground, they'll be like pop, bounce right back up. And then you bounce onto the other wheel, and the other wheel goes bop, and you become like a really fast seesaw until your plane basically just explodes and the wings pop off. So always want to lower the spring and dampening ratio, not to zero, but just pretty low for safety purposes. And unfortunately, I have to use the X2 cockpit um, for this plane because it's just it's too high up in the atmosphere to use any of the other cockpits, even though they are lighter. So yeah, there's the XJ2. Oh, one final thing. I'm almost certain I may have spoken about it in the episode, or maybe I'm just misremembering or remembering thinking about it. But when you fly these planes, these X planes, you are going to be above the altitude where there's actual oxygen for a long time. And you may have this habitat enabled, but there's no scrubber. It's not scrubbing the oxygen. And there's no space here to store carbon dioxide. So you keep that in mind because the carbon dioxide will continue to build up even if you have oxygen. Your carbon dioxide to oxygen ratio in the cabin is going to build up if you're above the altitude, I think, of 16 kilometers. You're going to start to see a rise in carbon dioxide. And if you're above 16 kilometers for like, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I don't know the exact time, but I've always struggled when I was coming back from the 22-kilometer missions. I've struggled with keeping my pilots conscious because they'll pass out from carbon dioxide poisoning. And so yeah, you want to really be careful with that. Let's see. I guess I'll move on to the next vehicle. It's actually going to be a rocket now, so I'll see you over in the VAB. All right, and here we are for the last unique launch vehicle of 1954. We've got the Ojote 4 bumper. Now, this rocket was probably my last ditch attempt at being able to fulfill the contracts that come with the suborbital development program. And as I spoke about in my last video when I showcased the Ojote 3 bumper, I included the sounding rocket payload that would be required for the 5,000 meters downrange contract. I just put like a good two units of energy in there. I didn't expect it to use that much energy. And I put the XASR2 engine on the Aerobee. And just use it uses the maximum possible burn time for each engine. So see, it's got 1 minute 10 seconds. I'm going 1 minute 30 seconds. The one up top, the XASR2, is 40 seconds of burn time, and I have it burning for 56 seconds. So basically, this bumper rocket was designed with the idea that it would try and at least reach the 3,000 kilometers downrange mark. And I don't quite remember if it did or not. So I guess if you're just coming off of the 1954 episode, you'll probably know that a little better than I am. Here I am a little bit far in the future. Um, But yeah, so for this rocket, it just uses an Ahote um, 3AB, so like the advanced biological capsule. Actually, let me show that off. I don't remember if that was in this episode or 1953, so I'll show that off right after this. But it uses the Ahote 3B base. Here, I removed the payload bay, and I just strapped a rocket to the top of the probe core. And this probe core has the maximum capability of 20 tons, but here we are with 15 tons. It's a 15-ton launcher. I probably could have saved a little bit of delta V by cutting down on the size of this probe core, changing up the fuselage a bit because I think by this time I had aluminum tanks. Um, yeah, let's actually see what the delta V would look like if I had my aluminum fuselage. And let's lower this down to, what's the weight? 16 tons. And 150. Let's lengthen this thing a bit so it doesn't look so stubby. And it would have been 200 meters per second more roughly. So I guess I didn't really mess up in any way. So there's that. But that's the Ahote 4 bumper. And still I've still got a lot of this like garbage on the outside, all these little logos and stuff like that. I have the US Air Force logo because at the time we're still using what would be considered like Air Force missiles that have been developed um, for war, but they are being utilized for space. And these are just like little short range ballistic missiles. Um, all right, I'll be back once I have the Hote 3AB up on the screen. All right, so welcome back. I was mistaken. It's the 2AB, not the 3A. The 3AB. Um, it is designated differently on the outside by this little AB that's at the top, and that designates the advanced biological payload within, and that utilizes this same body more or less as the biological payload. I had increased the biological payload in size to match the advanced biological capsule, um, mostly because I wanted to, how do you call it? I wanted to build a rocket that was capable of lifting the advanced biological payload um, from the get-go. So here's our sounding rocket payload. I have plenty in here. It's for the maximum contract once again. And instead of a different engine, I'm using the NA75 110. And that is a early Redstone rocket engine. Um, and the reason I'm using it on the AB as opposed to the A4 that we had been using before is this engine would be powering the early versions of our next series of rockets that should be in 1955, if I'm not mistaken. They are the Ahote 100 series, and they are essentially rockets that replaced the bumper rockets. They perform the same function as the bumper rockets. They're essentially downrange launchers, and they're attempts at creating a orbit capable vehicle. Uh, and there are going to be quite a few of those launches because we go, we have, I think, two of every single version all the way up to the Ahote 600, and there might even be a Ahote 700 at some point. So we go from 100 to 200 to 300 to 400. You'll notice that it mirrors the current designations of 002 or 001, 003, you know. Um, The Ahote 3 must have been the film capsule then. Yeah, probably. Okay, I'm losing track. But anyways, I think that's it for this episode of the extras. I just wanted to explain the vehicles, what engines they use. This one is, I mean, this is probably the end of the simple vehicles, and so our later extras episodes will get a little bit more in depth. I think the planes are obviously the most interesting aspect of the extras series. Um, so moving forward, it'll probably get a little bit more in depth with the rockets. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please leave a like or a comment if you want to discuss any more of these designs or have a more detailed breakdown of a specific rocket version. Um, anyways, I think that'll be all, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you later.